Hello and welcome to It's an Artful Life. I'm your host, Jillian Rhodes. This project started with a question: do the arts matter anymore? I decided to start asking people that very question and came up with this project, an experiment on how and if people see and experience the arts in their daily lives. Is it an artful life? Let's find out. Over the course of these interviews, I've noticed people have made a very strong line between being creative and being artistic. There's a kind of fear or hesitation about the label artistic, and even more, creativity is often seen in both these interviews and beyond as either something you have or something you don't. And if you don't, you're pretty much out of luck. But today, my interviewee looks at things a little differently. She sees creativity as a skill instead, one that can be learned and strengthened, and is on a mission to help people do exactly that. Can you just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Marine Tanguy. I'm the CEO of MTArt, and MTArt is an artist agency. So we manage and finance a select group of contemporary artists.
Okay. Where are you originally from?
So I'm from a small island in France on the west coast called Ile de Ré, which has no hospital or high school, but lots of birds and fishes and lots of lovely landscapes. So not much art work going on. So that's where I grew up for 17 years.
Okay. And you're based in London now, right?
Yeah. So our offices are literally next to Regent's Park, which is lovely, which is also where we get that light so you can see now.
Yeah.
Really nice.
So can you tell me a little bit about you said you're the CEO of MTArt. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So, well, basically the MTArt was a long journey for me personally where I wanted to grow artists. And the main business models in my field are, I think the auction house and the galleries, very much if you want to have a business. So I was a young manager of a gallery when I was 21, and then I got sent by an investor to LA when I was 23 to open my own art gallery, which was called therefore Dore Gallery after the small island I came from. So I think I felt unhappy as an employee, but I was like, maybe that's not because it's not my thing, and maybe when it would be my thing, I'll be happier. But I was still unhappy when I owned my own gallery, despite the fact that obviously I was in the art world and that was one of the business models I was supposed to do. So I discovered that basically, my passion being growing them, strategizing behind them, and being completely with them all the way was not really suiting a retail heavy business model that is the gallery model. So basically a shop. So I was becoming a shop owner, and I was not a really excited shop owner, if that makes sense. So I looked at what you have in LA for Hollywood, for music and film. You have a lot of agencies that grow talents and believe that there are ways when you find someone absolutely brilliant to be behind it and grow it. And I was like, that's really interesting. Returned to London, and I registered my own name, thinking I'd be a freelance on a bicycle for a while. And that was a year and a half ago. And obviously, it grew really quickly. So I think I would probably not have put that name if I had known it would become a company. But now we're a small team of 4, plus the accountant 5, exciting times for him. And yeah, so we've done, in the first year, we've raised funds. We grew the team. We've made sure that all the artists were financed in terms of their studio and production costs. We've developed partnerships. So we've worked with King's College University and soon Cambridge University on the 1st of March, councils, governments, brands, done exhibitions. Like, one of my artists is currently in Davos for the World Economic Forum today, Anina. So for us, we select people we think are smart and matters in terms of what they say, in terms of the visuals as well that they use. And then we want them to be respected as much as we respect them. And we want what they say to obviously engage as many people as possible. So that's kind of the core, I think, what we do on a daily basis.
Okay. And, but, you're kind of working to support them and back them. So, do you consider yourself an artistic person?
So I think I have creativity, but I'm not an artist. So I think, and that sounds very philosophically heavy, but I think I see an artist as someone who has combination of innovative technique, so really like actually technically skilled, as much as obviously the message and the brain is aligned with the content, and the visuals and content are aligned, as much as having a vision. So that means throughout experimentation and different body of works, it will still be their voice. So they're building their voice as well. That I don't have. And so I wouldn't call myself an artist on that basis. I think anyone who works in the creative fields have to be creative. I think when I come to a meeting and I'm told, here's that random window or here's that random warehouse space and we want this to happen, of course you have to be creative to be thinking, okay, I think that would look really good there. We could have a performance going on there. We could have this interaction. So I think you definitely require creativity, but I think not every creative can be a really talented artist. I think that's the difference. But however, I think if you want to work with artists, you need to be creative because you need to have the sensitivity to appreciate what they do. It's not a business where it's just numbers and Excel docs. Like you have to relate to the person you, I think, supporting. So that's the main differences that I would say.
So do you think creative and artistic is the same thing? Or, because you were distincting like creativity and being an artist, but do you think artistic and creativity is the same thing?
So well, for me, it's more that I think creativity is a skill, and I think everyone should hopefully have it or should develop it or should be taught this at school. I think like being creative is really helpful in your life. It's just coming up with quick solutions. It's seeing the world, I think, in a nice way too. So I think creativity it's a more mainstream skill that I would wish for everyone to have, and I wish for everyone to nurture. However, I think for me, artists are people that just, have that vision and that talent and forward. So it's not that I divide artistic and creativity. It's more that I divide the actual talents and creativity. So I think it's a bit the same. I think everyone should read and everyone should understand math and should understand all of this. It doesn't mean I'm going to become a writer. But it still means that I should engage with literature and read. I think that's kind of the same in terms of how I see it. I would hope that everyone is more creative. I think creativity is generally a really nice thing to have as a skill and to develop it as such.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about it as a skill, and many people call it a kind of innate something that you have or you don't. So it's an interesting perspective. So I wanted to ask, what drives you to the arts? So how did you originally decide to study it? Kind of what moved you to get involved with the arts?
Yeah, the field. So I think what initially interested me in the artistic fields, I was 10 and I was reading a lot of romantic books. So that's all the 19th century onwards, and that's a lot of poetry as well. I think, I was someone, first of all, with a very dull reality. Literally nothing happens on this island full time. And so that's kind of the reality of it. And obviously, like, my books were an escape. There were two things. There were perspective on the outside world, i.e. there are worlds where things happen. And if one believes in it, this may happen. And then the second thing is that, it gives you perspective. Like, the characters in my books were traveling, were exchanging dialogues on very different perspective and, engaged in that. So I basically lived through escapism, from 10 to 17, through all the books and the movies and everything that I could look at. That was basically an escape. I think that probably increased my imagination, and I think that probably is the creativity that I'm now using now. So I think, first of all, it's an escape, but not an escape in a sense like, it wasn't an escape to just be locked in my room for the rest of my time. But the minute I was 17, I wanted to be part of that world because it had driven me to reproduce what creativity inspired me. So I think it's an inspiration and an escape mixed. So it depends on people, but I think for me it was definitely like, it wasn't to be in my bedroom. It was to actually be part of what I had read. So I think art is the same way, where even when I have tough days or whenever difficulties arise, I think that gives you perspective. I think when I step into a museum, the same when I read a book or listen to music, I generally, it's almost the opposite to social media. It calms you down. It generally makes you like your heart level goes much, well, at least for me, but it just goes much softer. And then you relate to as a people as well. That's another human being that's trying to tell you something. So it's giving you a human connection with someone else that you don't know. And obviously I think that's, especially in those times, really good. But yeah, I think it just puts me, it's a very weird kind of mix of being quite serene, at the same time as thinking quite clearly and being inspired to move forward. I think that's kind of the thing I get from dance music, like literature, arts, like whatever creative fields I will ever be witnessing. I think it's a really nice feeling. So that's what I have personally always had since I'm little. So that's the reason why I wanted to work in it.
Okay. So, do you have a particularly memorable experience with the arts?
I mean, with a painting or with in general?
In general, just just a moment that kind of stands out, or something.
I think it's difficult to, I'm sure everyone will respond this, but I think it's difficult to single one out, because that's what I do every day. So there's been so many incredible moments. I think studio visits, when you enter a studio and you are within the realm of someone that's brilliant, and you can see that, and you can see how the years, like the brain has been thinking about all these things and testing all these things, and the works are really strong. It's still something that's extremely exciting. Like my boyfriend always says that I call him like I just met Father Christmas, because I think it just feels like a bit of magic was reproduced in that tiny room. And it's always so tiny as well. It's like basically 2 meters by 2 meters, but there's so much magic contained in that tiny place. So I think that's definitely one of the things that would just hit me. And I think after that, it's a human thing. So it's seeing a work that touches you, but it's the same in dance. It's the same in any other creative fields. Like there's performances you watch and your heart literally like just sinks, because you feel connected to the work you're looking at, and that's obviously going to stay with you. It's like an imprint. I think whatever work touches you leave an imprint on you. So as you go older, you have all those imprints you carry with you. But I think I would definitely say there's multiple imprints, just not just one. But I think that's what's quite beautiful, is that you never remember the feeling you had when you watched it. Even if it's like 3 years later, that very specific moment is always with you. And when you talk about it, it's still very much there. I think that's like a book. I still remember my favorite books. I just still remember carrying that feeling with me.
Okay. So considering what you've told me already, and the way you work and stuff, this could be a very silly question, but do you think that you experience the arts on a daily basis? And I mean like around you in the office, walking to work, getting up in the morning, that kind of like daily life.
Yeah, well, I mean, behind me, as you can see, there's works everywhere,
Of
and
course.
there's no space for it. So, like, yes, I think. Well, I mean, yeah, I talk to artists every day. I'm probably surrounded by art every day. I don't think I'm generally in the real world, but I didn't think I wanted to anyway be in the exact real world. So I'm glad I found a way somehow to just be mixed. So no, yeah, I do think, yeah, I think I will be, it's one of those things. I don't know, someone mentioned it recently, but I think I would have been someone probably quite melancholic or a bit depressed if I wasn't in touch with creativity, where I found that it's filled a big hole or gap in me, and therefore now it's every day, everywhere. But I will be also reading poetry every 2 seconds, so like going to an exhibition or talking to an artist or looking at things. I can't, it's not like something you stop on. I don't take a weekend off from it. It's more something that you just continuously acquire, because that makes you feeling better. We did a whole weekend in Vienna. And all I did was just looking at art, and the creator was amazing. And there was even a talk at 2 a.m. at the museum, and literally that's heaven. I would not speak for probably 2 hours sleep, but I was generally the happiest person I could ever be created, because all I had to do was to listen to people talking about and look at art. And I was like, that's literally heaven. Reality obviously is mixed with business and mixed with deadlines and mixed with things that are not that. But that's the happiest state I could ever be, I think, when I'm surrounded by it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I understand what you mean by that. But so kind of want to do a little bit of a thought experiment. So especially what you just said, you said that you don't really feel like you live in the real world, and that because you're kind of living in this bubble of art, and you also talked about creativity as a skill that people should develop. So um, the kind of the thought of experiment is, if we were to kind of take art out of the world, obviously your world wouldn't exist, but the kind of, do you think that people could still live without art? Would they still be creative? Would they still have that skill? Like, kind of, what do you think that world would look like?
Well, I think it would be like a very sad real estate, loads of buildings everywhere, but I think it's not something that's very community engaging in my head. I think I definitely am, the business strives to integrate art. So we put art on the streets and on buildings, and I think I don't want that to be a bubble anymore. That's why I would love everyone to have the creative skills to appreciate it, because I think I would like everyone to go through what I'm going. I think it's not that I'm not in the real world in the sense that I'm escaping reality. It's more that I think creative people are just optimistic. They're hopeful. They would put, I did this. They put all the money they have, the pennies, can sleep on the sofa just to make sure that they can see their dream or their projects taking shape. And they just hope for the best with it. And of course, any highly realistic / cynical person would say was unlikely to go well, but that's just the type of person they are. They just think it's going to be okay about it. And I think that energy, it's really positive. It's also, I think, I have an artist from a different nationality. My team is from different nationalities. Art is an international language in itself. The very idea of nationalities and all those current issues just literally is not in that world. Like 96% of people in the creative fields in England voted against Brexit, like, because it doesn't make a single sense when you discuss culture to be thinking of people in a box when there's no boxes. It makes absolutely no sense. I think is what I'm saying is not the real world. Is I just think because it attracts a certain type of personality that just gambles with life and hope for the best with life more than I think that's it. I think we are just like my artist is doing as the one that we mentioned was in Davis today. She's doing a project across 20 countries this year, using social media for people to relate to peace, but that's completely insane and like also fortune, and she's still got finance and people engaged and things behind her, institutions and stuff. I think that's the core of a lot of creative people, is we just think, okay, we'll just attempt it, as mad as it sounds, we'll give it a go. And I think that's a great energy for that matter. And I think it's young, it's dynamic, it's hopeful, it's good. Yeah, I would hope for more people to have this kind of energy, because I think it's nice energy to evolve into.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, one of the things that I know about your company is trying to get, normal people to experience, not just artists, but, this kind of idea of everybody developing creativity and appreciation for the arts. When it's true that a lot of people, don't necessarily experience the arts as they are. They see something, they don't necessarily feel anything from it, they don't understand it. And not that it means that they're stupid or anything, but how do you think, how are you working to help people understand and experience the arts, on the street or in their lives?
Well, I think it's first is exposure. I think you always scared of something you don't know. So I think the more you familiarize yourself with something, you can understand it better. So I think definitely for people to, like, most people don't see art. They don't, like, it's just, they were much more likely to see Justin Bieber on their iPhone than they are to come across a work of art. That's the reality of currently we experience, right? So I think in terms of exposure, that is still going to be a key thing. After that, I think it's like, basically, one thing that the creative skills teaches you is to go away from dogma, which is a bit similar to philosophy, I think, but it's basically that you can come up with your own way to look at things. You can use your eyes to actually look at things. There's not such thing as that's crap, that's great, right? So And I think, and it's just, taking risk in asking questions and trying to understand things and trusting yourself to get to those answers as well. That's the toughest, because I think the issue is that this is why I would love it to be taught better, that exposure mixed with the way to approach things, not in let's have a look at this masterpiece and what is great, but actually let's expose you to loads of art and let's have you question and interact with it and come up with the ones you prefer over the ones, the compositions you relate to, the messages you relate to. Because I think in life that's the issue, and that's a social classes issue in this country, where they therefore feel silly to ask questions, they feel silly to enter, they feel under dogma to come up with a certain type of sentences, which actually, which I think that's the main block. They're scared to feel stupid in any creative environments, when actually, sadly, this is exactly the opposite. There's no stupidity involved. Like, the more you watch things, the more you use your eyes, the more you listen, and obviously the more you're going to be able to connect them together. But that doesn't require enormous intelligence. It just requires, because they just have seen a lot. So this is why I'm capable of doing this. So it's a tricky thing, because this, like in this country, for instance, if you look at education, art is taught mainly in private schools rather than state schools, and which means it makes a huge difference between people, and it also makes them think that's attributed to a class. France is not perfect, far from that, but at least education is free and is more state school driven, which means that basically the elite kid or the middle class kid or the working class kid is still going to get exposed to a similar type of information. So whatever information seems inaccessible makes people probably scared to try to access it. And I think and that's the same with vocabulary, and it's the same as the more you use simple but smart, good words to describe our field, the better you can do that. So it's all that democratization aspects, which goes with exposure, how you speak about it, how you get people engaged with it, and not just them looking, but actually engaging. But that's all, it's an educative process. And that's why we work as much on the educative side than the private side, because frankly, like the only way this will be done is because if the educative system thinks that's not decoration or luxury, it's not an extra to know about art, but actually in general, being exposed to creativity is a positive thing for everyone, not as an extra if you finished all the important subjects, but actually as a part of the curriculum. That's a really good tool to have for the long term, which I think it is. I think that's kind of how I see it, but that's a very long run work. We're doing a very small step in it. I've heard in the States that MIT has started integrating creativity to their curriculums, and they're experimenting with different ways to look at the schooling system. So I think it's on its way. But I think that's, education will have to be a part of it, because if you don't give knowledge to people or access to knowledge, it's really difficult as an adult to say to them, be interested in something that you've never come across before. That's much harder to do on the other way around, but a kid is much easier.
Yeah, true. You bring up a really interesting point about this divide in the class. Art is often seen as something for a higher class. Somebody who has enough money to go to see the opera or the orchestra or the ballet or something like that. So it's a different perspective on that, to kind of bring it down.
Yeah, but also I think due to this, my mother's a primary teacher. That's why I'm probably quite familiar with kids a lot. But I think I was in her class on the 3rd of Jan in front of 65 kids. But there's an age when you're much younger where you literally just ask questions. And is when that skill should be integrated to the curriculum. Because I had those random questions. I was asked if I threw a pot of paint on the canvas, am I an artist? That's a really good question. And that's like a 6 years old who comes up with it. So I think that's where this is where it needs to be quite early, because if that kid thinks that's okay to ask those questions, so you can get answered to, and he can have his sense of, like, he can make up his own opinion, then that's really, really good for the long term. But it's not when he's going to be 18 and he thinks he has to come up with a very clever question that you can do it. It's when he's 6, and you literally should have him asking every bloody question of the book so that he works out what he thinks an artist stands for in his head. So, because all those questions are really interesting, and that's because they still haven't been completely formatted. So they think that's okay to be asking all those questions.
Okay, nice. That's a good question, actually. I'll have to think about that.
It is a good, but I'm glad you asked it because, also I do believe there's talent and I also believe there's crap in my world. And I think it's good to talk about what's talent and what's not talent because then it makes other people who are outside of the field respected better. So I think it shouldn't be a traumatizing question to answer to. It should just be a very normal question to be dealing with. So I think it's good that they asked this question. Of course they would ask
Right.
it.
So the last question is what you think living an artful life means.
So I think um, living an artful life. Well, I think obviously is being sensitive in my head to visuals because in my head, like a lot of creativity is still through performances and visuals. And any senses, so that would be the external music. So basically having your senses as much as the brain engaged, which probably implies intellectual curiosity, probably apply an awareness of your environment. Like I think you get more sensitive to what surrounds you. And just seeing as much creative work as you can. You can attempt it if you want yourself as well, but just trying to like integrate creativity somehow in, I'm sure, because some people don't have that job, so I'm sure into your daily schedule, but just trying to integrate it as much. That will probably be an artful life. It could be anything from, your house, having a more artful house, but to having like going on an afternoon with your girlfriends, like doing pottery making or whatever this is, but just integrating creativity as much as you possibly can. And then of course, like I would encourage to go to all those shows and to go and listen to everyone at the top of the creative fields who is trying to inspire people that way. So any access that you can have to attend a direct connection with any creative work, I would highly encourage it because that's where the magic happens still is in my head. So that's what I would say. It's difficult to define because it's just could be so vague. It could be anything from going on a residency holiday to just doing your house to anything. But I think, yeah, that's what I would encourage at least is trying to integrate creativity in any shape or form.
It's an Artful Life will return next week with another interview. Thanks for listening.